Hello everyone, this is Chantal from glutenfreecooking123.com. In my last video, I showed you 3 different ways to make rice flour. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use that rice flour that we made to make flat rice bread with it. Stay with me and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so I have 2 different types of rice flour right here. This one is the one that was processed. I soaked it and I dried it a little bit and then processed it in the food processor, and this one was milled with the KitchenAid attachment. And you can see the difference. This is a lot finer and this is more on the coarser side. It's still flour, but it is on the coarse side. So we are going to use both of them separately, and we are going to compare the rice that came out of each of these 2 types of flour. I could not make rice flour with a third way because my food processor did not have enough of a high speed, and that requires a much heavier duty food processor. But I did talk about it in my video, and I will put a link to that video up here in the iCards, and also I will put a link for it in the description box below. So let's move on to making the bread right now. I have 2 separate pots right here, one for each type of rice flour, and I'm going to add 1 cup of water to each of them. 1 cup in this one, and 1 cup in this one. Then we are going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 over here, and 1 over here. And 1 tablespoon of olive oil into each of these pots. So 1 over here. I'm going to dissolve the salt. And then we are going to put them on the stove and bring them to a boil. I'm going to put it on high heat, and same with this one. And we are going to cover them. Once they come to a boil, then we are going to add our rice. The water in this small pot has already begun to boil, so I'm going to quickly add in my rice. But before I do that, I'm going to turn off the stove. I'm going to turn off the heat and add it. And as I add, I'm going to stir. And I'm going to keep it on this eye so that it just takes some of the heat that's left and help it to, if there's any excess water, so that you don't have to add extra rice flour in there. And in this small pot right here, I'm using the rice flour that I processed in a food processor. So once it gets combined really well and it starts getting together like a dough, so this is what we're basically doing. We are making a rice dough. Then I will take it off the heat. If you do notice that your dough is too sticky and too wet, and you can't actually form it into a flat rice bread, then you might need to add a little bit more rice flour, or you could be using the wrong rice flour, because there are different types of rice flour. If you are using sweet rice flour, you will need to use less water or more rice. Okay, the other one began to boil as well, so I'm going to move this off the heat and set it aside. And then I'm going to add the rice to this one. And I'm going to use the heat from this one over here because it's easier. There we go, and just mix. Again, until everything is well combined. I feel like I need to add a little more rice actually. Not too much, just a tiny bit. Maybe about a couple tablespoons or less. Because it's a little bit too sticky. Okay, I think I need a little bit more. There we go. I think this might not have been exactly 1 cup because I didn't actually level it. Could probably add a tiny bit more, but I think it's good. Just a little more. Here. Yeah. This is the one with the rice that was milled using the KitchenAid attachment. Okay. And this is the one that was processed in the food processor. Oops, I have some clumps here that did not get processed very well. I did process the rice flour, this rice flour, after I dried it after I dehydrated it in the oven. I did process it again in the food processor just to get rid of any large clumps, but I should have sifted it also because I do see some clumps in here, but I don't have a large enough sift to sift the flour. That's okay. We're going to cover these and let them cool for a little bit. You don't want to keep them exposed to the air because they will dry out and you won't be able to actually make your rice flour. It is a little bit too hot right now. Sometimes I just take it and work with it, but I'm just gonna wait a little bit right now. We're gonna cover it and make sure it's off the heat and let it cool down. The rice has been cooling for a little bit. It's not completely cooled, but I'm losing daylight here and I have to finish doing this. So I have a cast iron pan right here and I'm going to preheat it on medium heat, and I will probably lower the heat as I cook the flat rice bread. So right now I'm going to prepare the dough to start rolling while this is preheating. Before I start on preparing the dough also, I have here a parchment paper that I folded in half, and I'm going to put it in my tortilla press. If you don't have a tortilla press, you could use a rolling pin. Just make sure to oil your rolling pin and also use some type of starch, like maybe some cornstarch or potato starch to spray the surface with, so that the rice dough does not stick to the countertop. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside. Right here I have sesame oil. You could use any type of oil you have, but I like to use sesame oil, and I'm just going to put a little bit on the counter and spread that. And I'm going to take my dough and put it right on that and knead it for a little bit. So just like you knead a regular dough, you just want to knead it like a wheat dough, and it just sticks together, as you can see. My cast iron pan is heated. I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit. You keep kneading it until it's sort of smooth. Now with this type of flour, the one that was processed in the food processor, it's a little bit on the grainy side. Like I said, I should have sifted it, but that's okay. And then what I like to do is I like to roll it into a log like this, and then just cut off a piece like so. Roll it in between my hands, about the size of a golf ball or so. Press it in here. And put it on my cast iron pan. You shouldn't touch it until it lifts off on its own and you start seeing bubbles, otherwise it will stick. Even if you are using a non-stick pan, if you try to lift it off right now, it's not going to lift. So just be patient. Also, what I like to do is to put this in the pot, the rice dough in the pot, so that it doesn't dry out, and then I cover it, and whenever I'm ready to take another dough, I just take it and press it. It's a super simple, super easy method. Then once I start seeing bubbles in the rice dough over here, let me turn on the light, maybe that would be better. Then I flip it over and let it cook on the other side. Sometimes I like to press it and that just kind of create bubbles in the bread, but right now it doesn't want to do that. I'm going to also knead the other dough while this is happening. I also like to keep one rice bread already pressed while this is getting cooked or baked, whichever way you want to say it. I think it's good. So kind of like this color. Sometimes I like to get some burns on them. Just gives it a nice taste. Take another one. You can see this goes pretty quickly. Press it between my hands, put it in here, and press. Okay, now I'm going to prepare the other dough also. This is definitely softer. It's even softer than the rice flour that I buy. I think it needed more rice flour. I could still use it though. I could feel though it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Time to flip this one. Actually, I'm going to keep this one on the counter to help it dry out a little bit. It's too wet for my liking. And I'm going to add some rice flour to it. So as you can see, this is not an intimidating process. It's super easy. It's one of the quickest gluten-free breads that you can make. You'll probably always have rice on hand. There we go. Another one. That should be good. It's still though, it's so soft. Weird. Even though it's the same rice. This one. And sometimes I also like to have a rag, a clean dish towel on hand, and I just wipe off like any of the burnt pieces off the pan so that the smoke alarm doesn't go off, and also it's cleaner that way. Okay, so I'm going to do one last one of the other rice flour, of the processed rice flour, and then we're going to try to make some of the milled rice flour. Also, what I like to do is to take some of the rice dough and just make these little rice cakes type of thing. My kids and I like to eat them like this.
They taste really good. That's why we can't wait for rice bread to appear on our plates. It's so delicious. We eat it by itself. The straps, just take them out, okay?
Wipe that off a little bit.
When I put it in, but I fixed.
Here's this one. Oh,
I was making delicious
lovely.
Just Elizabeth got.
Right now, so we're just eating. Then he ate the pig.
And then he did a pig. Not he ate the pig.
I'm going to stop right here and then I'll finish the rest off camera. Okay, so these are the two different rice breads. This one is made with the rice flour that was processed in the food processor, and this one was made with a rice flour that was milled in the KitchenAid attachment. Can you guys tell the difference?
I can't. I can. One's darker than the other. Actually, I can.
Okay, I'm gonna hold on, guys. And when you do make your rice bread, make sure to cover it with a towel just to make sure it stays moist while the rest are getting cooked. Okay, so this one over here is the one with the milled rice flour, and this is with the processed rice flour. Basically the same thing. Let's do a rip test. So milled, processed. Again, this one is a little thicker because this one got pressed really thin because the dough was wetter. So that's the processed one. It passes the test.
I'm trying to test these.
Okay.
Tell me what that one tastes like.
I love rice bread.
I love it too.
Whenever I make it, I'm always telling the kids, don't eat all of it. We have to use it for other things. So this one, the food processor one, tastes awesome. And yeah, let's see this one. This is the milled one. I do taste a little bit of a difference, and maybe that's because the food processor one was baked and this was not. Honestly, the one that was made with the food processor tastes better. I don't know why. The milled one does not taste that. I mean, it tastes great still, but it does not taste as good as the food processor one. Texture, it's less chewy. The food processor one, a lot more chewy. Maybe it could be because I did add some rice flour to the milled one after when it was cooling down, so that could have also affected the texture too, because you do want to add it to boiling water. That's what makes it gets the rice cooked a little bit, and then it helps it to bind together, and it creates this glue type. You know, when you cook the rice or overcook it, let's say you added too much water and it becomes sticky, sort of like sticky rice. Even if it wasn't sticky rice, it will turn into sticky rice if you add too much water. This is what happens when you do cook the rice flour in the water. It creates this gooey texture and it binds the rice molecules together, and it helps it to create rice bread. It's super easy, super delicious, and I use it as tortilla bread for like chicken fajitas and tacos and all sorts of stuff. I also use it to make sandwiches. My favorite is za'atar sandwiches with this. If you guys don't know what za'atar is, you're missing out. It's basically a Lebanese spice. It's thyme, a different type of thyme than the thyme you're used to. It's actually very similar to oregano. My parents used to go around and harvest it. It grows wild in Lebanon, so they would just harvest it and then take it to the mill, and they would mill it for them, and then add the spices. So there's sumac in there, there's salt, and there's toasted sesame seeds, and then you add some olive oil to it, and this is what we just use it to make sandwiches. You could add it as a seasoning to something if you want. I mean, people don't normally do that, but they do add it to certain foods. We also make manaish and add it to manaish. Anyways, I don't know why I'm talking about za'atar. Oh yeah, because I said I make za'atar sandwiches with this. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope you learned something new today, or a new way. Maybe it was educational. I hope so. I love teaching people, and that's one of the things that I just enjoy. If you are new to this channel and you like what you see here, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so that you can receive notifications of whenever I upload new videos. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family so that they can also learn how to make rice bread, especially if they are gluten-free, if they're on a gluten-free diet and they can't eat wheat. You know, this is going to be very helpful. This is a 2-video series. I will also again put the link for the video in the iCards for the how to make rice flour video, and I will also put it in the description box below. And I have a recipe on my blog for this very rice bread. I will also share that with you in the description box below. And if you like this video, please hit the like button. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.